This is a revenge story that happened more than 20 years ago, and it is quite a dramatic one. I will unfold it slowly. It took place more than 20 years ago in Beijing, the capital of China. The protagonist we are going to talk about today was a soldier. His name was Jiangguomen, and I guess most of you might have heard of him. He was around 30 years old back then. Let me first introduce who this Jiangguomen was in detail. Jiangguomen was born on September 20th, 1964. He was probably 1 year younger than me. This incident occurred exactly on September 20th, 1994, which happened to be his birthday. Later, some people said that he chose to end his own life on his birthday. But I don't think so. I believe he chose to make others die on his birthday. First, let's look at Jiangguomen's short life journey. Whose fault was it after all? Was it society's fault? Or who was to blame for pushing him down this path? I will elaborate on this gradually. In the previous stories we talked about whether it was by Boshan or Jiangguomen people said they hated society and had split personalities. But personally, I think neither by Boshan nor Jiangguomen hated society. They only hated themselves for not having money. What they wanted was money. Moreover, we can see that after robbing 1.3 million yuan, Bai Boshan returned to Beijing. On that day, he was extremely happy. He went to Bai Lake and spent the whole day fishing, riding a bicycle while looking up at the blue sky and white clouds, feeling on top of the world. The world was so beautiful. So they didn't hate society at all once they had money. They didn't harbor any hatred towards society anymore. The claim that they hated society is completely nonsense. But the man I'm going to talk about today, this is what real hatred towards society looks like. I don't have the right to judge. I can only tell the story and let everyone else, and society, be the judge. Jiangguomen joined the army in 1981. Right from the start, he showed outstanding shooting skills. It is said that his marksmanship was excellent, and I think this is true. I have read a lot of materials about him. It's hard to say exactly how amazing he was, but it was definitely top-notch. After all, he was a soldier. Being proficient in his professional skills was fundamental, and it meant he had a promising future. Additionally, he was very smart. In the army, if your skills and performance were just average, you would be discharged once your service term ended. But looking at Jiangguomen's military record, he was not discharged. Instead, he stayed in the army and kept getting promoted. Eventually, he rose to the position of staff officer, specifically a lieutenant staff officer in the General Staff Corps. This shows how capable he was. Coming from a rural family in Hunan province, it was no easy feat for him to achieve this. If we trace his career path, we can see that he was really good at navigating his way up. After becoming a staff officer, he even became a favorite of his superiors because he was recognized and promoted by them, so he was doing quite well. He was a smooth operator who knew how to handle all kinds of relationships. As we can imagine, China is a society based on human connections. When you reach a certain position, many people will curry favor with you and ask you for favors. This is very common in China, and Jiangguomen was no exception. After becoming a staff officer, many people came to him for help. Of course, there were things he could do and things he couldn't. At this stage of life, people tend to be impetuous. For certain matters, others would spend money, send gifts, treat him to dinners, and buy him good wine. There's no need for me to elaborate. Everyone understands how this works. Jiangguomen was no different. He often accepted small favors from others. After all, nothing is done for free. But if he kept doing this, there would inevitably be things he couldn't accomplish. Not everything can be done, and there would be times when he took others' benefits but still failed to deliver. This is just how it is. We've all been there too. We often ask others for favors through connections. This is just part of living in China. Of course, if something can't be done, it can't be done. I've sent many gifts to people for favors, and when things don't work out, I just let it go. You can't go back and ask for your gifts back, right? You just don't ask that person for help again next time. But the guy Tian Mingyan dealt with was very different. Tian Mingyan had taken this person's gifts to do something for him but couldn't get it done. Enraged, the guy yelled, "You can't do it, and you won't even return my stuff? I'm going to report you." The report turned out to be successful. Tian Mingyan had just been promoted to staff officer, but this report got him demoted from that position. Just think about it. How hard was it for him to climb up to the rank of staff officer, or even chief of staff? Yet, this one incident cost him everything. But even so, Tian Mingyan was still young, less than 30 years old. He could afford to start over. After being demoted, where was he sent? He was reassigned to a company. However, he was still given the position of deputy company commander, which wasn't too bad. We all know what a deputy company commander does essentially. It's a gopher job, handling logistics and miscellaneous tasks, right? That's the role of a deputy company commander in the army. At that time, where was Tian Mingyan stationed? He was in the 12th Regiment of the Guard Division of the Beijing Garrison Command's Communications Security Zone, serving as Deputy Company Commander with his garrison in Tongxian, Beijing. Undoubtedly, this position was far less prestigious than his previous role as a staff officer. But Tian Mingyan just decided to take it one step at a time and bide his time. From this, we can see that he was really unlucky. Ever since he was demoted from staff officer to deputy company commander, misfortune seemed to follow him everywhere. Let's take a closer look at what happened next, step by step. Let me give you a small example. In his company, there was a fellow soldier who wanted to go home on leave to visit his family, but he didn't get along with Tian Mingyan. He had asked for leave several times, but Tian Mingyan kept rejecting him, saying, "You don't meet the requirements, no," refusing to let him go. This soldier was also very stubborn. If you weren't going to approve his leave, maybe it was because he didn't meet the regulations, so he could have tried to negotiate or find a way around it. But instead, he went straight to the company to see Tian Mingyan, pestering him every day, "Are you going to approve my leave or not? I have urgent family matters. Why won't you let me go? You're just abusing your power." He kept swearing at Tian Mingyan nonstop. As deputy company commander, Tian Mingyan had a temper too, didn't he? He thought to himself, "Since this matter is under my jurisdiction, I have the authority to make the call and I'm not approving it." He stuck to his decision and refused to budge. Eventually, the two young men got into a heated argument. Frustrated, Tian Mingyan lost his temper and beat the soldier hard. Really gave him a good thrashing. In the army, fights like this weren't exactly a big deal, right? But in the end, his superiors found out about it. From this incident, we can tell that Tian Mingyan probably had a fiery temper and was very stubborn. Definitely not someone with a mild personality, that's for sure. When his superiors called him in for a talk, they said, "Why did you hit him? You could have just rejected his leave. There was no need to resort to violence. You're the deputy company commander. How could you hit a subordinate like that?" But Tian Mingyan was stubborn and unyielding, retorting, "I hit him, so what? He was pestering me every day and bad-mouthing me. Didn't he deserve it?" His defiance only made his superiors angrier. They suspended him from duty and gave him a disciplinary warning on his record. Can you believe how unlucky he was? He had just been demoted from staff officer to deputy company commander, and now he was in trouble again. And this wasn't the end of it. He had received the disciplinary warning, but he hadn't fully handed over his duties yet. He was basically sidelined with nothing to do. Moreover, the regimental headquarters threatened him, "If you don't shape up, we'll kick you out of the army and send you back to your hometown to farm. You think you can still stay in the military?" So Tian Mingyan went back to his hometown in Hunan to handle his wife's funeral arrangements. I often think about this question: who was really responsible for his wife's death? If we look at it logically, it was definitely his superiors in the regiment, the regimental political commissar, his company political instructor, the company commander, and the others. Without these people pressuring his hometown, none of this would have happened, right? It was definitely the people in his regiment who caused this tragedy. That's why he chose to take revenge on the people in the regiment. It makes sense when you think about it. Some people say he should have gone to Hunan to kill those who forced his wife to have an abortion, but I'll get to that later. This isn't for me to judge. I'm just telling the story as it happened. I don't have the right to pass judgment. Even though it's been more than 20 years, I won't say anything irresponsible. I'll only talk about what I know. After 3 days, September 15th, 16th, and 17th, he finally finished arranging his wife's funeral. As I mentioned earlier, Tian Mingyan had a 4-year-old daughter. One day, he took his young, somewhat sensible daughter out and said, "Little Yenna, Daddy's going to take you for a walk." The two of them went outside the village. Little Yenna looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, do you know where Mommy went?" Grandma and Grandpa said Mommy went to a very faraway place and won't be coming back for a long, long time. Tian Mingyan replied, "What they told you isn't true, Yenna. Look, this is our family's ancestral grave. Mommy is right here. This is her tomb. She didn't go anywhere. She's dead and buried here. Do you know who killed her? They also killed your little brother who was just about to be born. In the future, you'll grow up, and you'll have to take care of yourself. Because Daddy is going to avenge Mommy. Daddy is going to kill the bad guys who killed her. From now on, whenever you miss Mommy and Daddy, you can come here and talk to us. We'll hear every word you say." He paused and added, "Let's not stay here anymore. It's time to go home. Daddy has to leave soon. I'm so sorry." Had he said everything he needed to say? On September 18th, Tian Mingyan returned to Beijing. By this time, he had fully made up his mind and was ready to carry out his revenge plan. Let's see what his first step was. To take revenge, the most important thing he needed was a gun. He was on good terms with Li, the armory keeper. One night in mid-September, he said to Li, "Shall Li, let's go have a meal together. Tomorrow is my birthday, and I'll be too busy then, so I want to treat you to dinner tonight, just the two of us." They had always gotten along well, and Tian Mingyan was still the deputy company commander, even though he was in trouble at the time. Li didn't think much of it. During the meal, Tian Mingyan said, "I heard the regiment just got a batch of new guns. I want to take a look at them. You know how much I love guns." "Can I?" As an old friend, Li readily agreed, "Sure, why not? Who would have thought you'd take a gun to kill someone? Go ahead, here are the keys. You can go in and look around yourself." Tian Mingyan went into the armory and picked out a Type 81 automatic rifle, the same type of gun that Bai Boshan had used before. This was a newly issued rifle to the army in 1994, so it was still quite new. He took one rifle and 6 magazines of ammunition. Each magazine held 38 rounds, the same as the M94 rifle. He couldn't carry more than that. 6 magazines were already quite heavy. Can you imagine trying to carry 1,000 or 2,000 rounds? It would have been impossible. So 6 magazines meant he had around 188 to 200 rounds in total. He wrapped the gun and bullets in a bag and hid them well. The next day, as usual, the soldiers had to assemble for morning drills, and the regimental leaders, the political commissar, instructors, and company commanders would come to inspect them and give speeches. These past few days, with National Day approaching, since they were part of the garrison command, they had to prepare for the celebrations. This routine had been happening every morning. But by then, Tianmingyan had already been suspended from duty and was just an idle bystander, along with some soldiers who were sick and couldn't participate in the drills. So the day before, Tianmingyan had taken the gun and bullets from the armory and hidden them under the inspection platform. How he managed to do that, I don't know. Besides his preparations, he also told 4 of his close buddies in the army, "Guys, tomorrow morning during the drill, if I yell 'get down,' you must do as I say and lie on the ground immediately, otherwise, you'll regret it." This shows that Tianmingyan was actually quite loyal. He didn't want to kill innocent people or his own friends. But as it turned out, those buddies didn't keep their promise to him. Everything was ready. At 7 a.m. on September 20th, 1994, Tianmingyan went to the cafeteria and ate a big breakfast to fill his stomach. Then he went to the drill ground early. At that time, the regimental political commissar and other officers hadn't arrived yet, and the soldiers were just gathering and getting ready. Tianmingyan stood by the side, watching like an onlooker. After all, he had no right to participate anymore. At 7:10 a.m., the morning drill officially began. The soldiers lined up neatly and started their drills, marching in formation, goose-stepping, the usual military exercises. And then, just as planned, the regimental political commissar, instructors, company commanders, and all the other officers arrived, the very people Tianmingyan wanted to kill. Tianmingyan committed suicide in the end, so we'll never know the exact details of how he intended to carry out his entire revenge plan. We can only analyze his actions based on what happened. Let's think about it. He had around 200 rounds of ammunition. Who was he planning to kill with all those bullets? He raised his gun and started shooting. And it went surprisingly smoothly. He killed the regimental political commissar, instructors, and company commanders on the spot, 8 people in total. After killing them, he yelled, "Get down," just as he had told his buddies the day before. And sure enough, they all dropped to the ground immediately, clearing the way for him to shoot unobstructed, ensuring he could kill all his targets. To most people, it would seem like his revenge was complete. All his enemies were dead. I think he had prepared all those bullets in case things didn't go as planned, if there was resistance or if he needed to shoot more people. But everything went so smoothly that he finished off all his targets in just 5 minutes. Once he was done, what did he do? He fled, running straight out of the military camp, deciding to take things one step at a time as he went. First, he ran to the street. Just then, a jeep drove by. He pointed his gun at the driver, forcing him to stop the car, and then got in. From his actions afterward, it was clear that Tianmingyan didn't know how to drive. He forced the driver to start the car and drive. Later, the jeep driver was killed, so we'll never know where Tianmingyan intended to go next. Official reports claim that he was heading to Tiananmen Square to carry out a larger-scale shooting spree, but I think this is completely irresponsible. There was no evidence to support this claim. He never even made it to Tiananmen Square. This was just a false narrative made up by the authorities. Let's continue with the story step by step to see the truth. Back in 1994, if you were driving from Tongxian into downtown Beijing, you would take Chang'an Avenue. The distance from Tongxian to Jiangguomen is about 20 kilometers. One thing we can be certain of is that Tian Mingyan had no intention of leaving Beijing. If he had wanted to flee the city, after leaving Tongxian, he would have taken the 3rd Ring Road. The 4th and 5th Ring Roads didn't exist back then, towards the China World Trade Center area. But he didn't tell the driver to take the 3rd Ring Road north or south towards Jinsong. This clearly shows he had no plans to escape Beijing. Instead, he told the driver to keep going straight. So where did they go? They drove straight to Jiangguomen Overpass, which is part of the 2nd Ring Road. Even then, he still showed no signs of wanting to leave the city. If he had, he would have taken the 2nd Ring Road. But he didn't. After passing Jiangguomen Overpass, something unexpected happened. I can't remember the exact details, but the driver somehow lost control of the car at a red light and crashed into a tree. Why the driver crashed, we'll never know. We can only say he was unlucky. This crash enraged Tian Mingyan, who shot and killed the driver on the spot. The driver tried to open the door and run away after the crash, but Tian Mingyan shot him in the head, killing him instantly. This further confirms that Tian Mingyan didn't know how to drive, because after killing the driver, he got out of the car instead of continuing to drive himself. After getting out of the jeep, he immediately tried to hail a minivan. Just then, a minivan drove by. He tried to stop it, but the driver tried to speed past him instead. But Tian Mingyan was faster with his gun. He shot the driver through the window, killing him instantly. Even then, he didn't get in the minivan and drive away, which once again proves he couldn't drive. But where was he going? We really have no idea. The claim that he was heading to Tiananmen Square is completely inaccurate. Even though he had reached Jiangguomen, if he had continued straight for another stop and then turned south, he would have reached Beijing Railway Station. Maybe that's where he was going, who knows? There's no reason to assume he was going to Tiananmen Square. I don't buy that story at all. The man is dead, so we shouldn't make baseless assumptions about his intentions. There were many possible places he could have been heading to. By this time, a lot of time had passed since he fled the military camp. Even though it was early morning and there was no traffic, driving 20 kilometers still took a while. The military police and armed police had already been alerted and were chasing him all the way to Jiangguomen, setting up a blockade around the area. So, after killing the minivan driver and getting out of the car, Tian Mingyan started to panic. Logically, as a trained soldier, he should have remained calm, but he clearly didn't. When he saw the large number of police and armed police surrounding him, he started shooting randomly at nearby buildings. Why would he waste bullets shooting at unrelated buildings? It doesn't make sense. He must have been panicking. At this point, he ran onto the road, where all the cars had come to a standstill. Drivers abandoned their vehicles and fled for cover, leaving all the cars parked on the street. Tian Mingyan ran onto the sidewalk, and the spot where he ended up was right downstairs from the Canadian Embassy. The entire shootout was filmed by staff members and journalists from the Canadian Embassy, which is why we have this precious video footage today. Without these recordings, we would have no visual evidence of what happened. It's from these videos that the famous scene of Tian Mingyan changing magazines with one hand became widely known. Let me explain what changing magazines with one hand actually means. Contrary to what some people think, it doesn't mean changing the magazine using only one hand. Even if you don't know anything about guns, I can explain how it works. Normally, when you're holding a rifle in your right hand and you've fired all 38 rounds in the magazine, the Type 81 automatic rifle, which was developed by China in 1981 based on the AK-47 design. Though it's not as good as the original AK-47, does not have a last round bolt hold open feature. This means that after firing the last round, the bolt does not stay open. So if you want to reload a new magazine, you have to use your left hand to remove the empty magazine, insert a new one, and then reach over to the right side of the gun to pull the bolt back to chamber a new round. This whole process takes time. But Tian Mingjian had a different technique. Instead of waiting until he had fired all the rounds in the magazine, he would switch magazines when there were still 2 or 3 rounds left, around 28 or 29 rounds fired. He would use his left hand to push a new magazine into the rifle, forcing the partially empty magazine out. This way, the new magazine would automatically chamber a round, eliminating the need to pull the bolt back with his right hand, thus saving valuable time. This is what is meant by changing magazines with one hand. However, this technique is generally discouraged in the military. Think about it during a tense shootout. Can you really keep track of exactly how many rounds you fired, down to the last 2 or 3? And in Tian Mingjian's case, bullets were extremely precious. Why would he waste 2 or 3 rounds just to save a few seconds? It seems unnecessary to me. Why is this technique not promoted in the military? First of all, it's very damaging to the gun. It puts a lot of stress on the magazine catch mechanism. Normally, when the magazine is empty, it falls out easily, and you can insert a new one smoothly. But when you force a new magazine in, while there are still rounds left in the old one, the pressure can damage the catch. So even though it looks cool in videos, it's not a practical technique for real combat. If it were actually useful, the military would have promoted it long ago. Later on, this move was featured in many Hong Kong movies and even in the film Wolf Warrior, but it was only for show, to make the characters look cool. After jumping out of the jeep, Tian Mingyan engaged in a fierce shootout with the armed police. This shootout fully exposed the fact that the armed police and special police units back then had no real combat experience. They were completely disorganized. And the worst part? They had no hand signals to communicate with each other. Instead, they were all yelling orders at the top of their lungs. Can you imagine what this was like? Tian Mingyan was hiding in a position, and the police and armed police were on the opposite side of the street. He was on the north side of Jiangguomen Outer Street. Since he had driven from the communications base, his car was on the right side of the road, and they were on the south side. Because they were all yelling, Tian Mingyan could hear exactly where they were. Whenever he heard a voice, he would take aim and shoot one shot, one kill. This is why the casualties were so high. Even police officers from the Dongqing District Police Station joined the operation, many of them wearing helmets. But a lot of them didn't take the situation seriously. They thought it was just another routine operation, like arresting prostitutes or gamblers. They were casually looking around, asking, "Where is he?" But Tian Mingjian's marksmanship was so accurate that even helmets couldn't save them. He shot them right through the helmet, killing them instantly. This is a testament to how good his shooting skills really were. So why did the casualties end up being so heavy? The worst part was what happened next. A No. 44 bus happened to drive by. Can you believe it? Out of all the buses on Chang'an Avenue, it had to be the No. 44. What an unlucky number. Back in those days, if you wanted to go to Dongdaqiao or Sanlitun, you would take buses like the No. 120 or No. 25, which also ran along this route. I didn't even know there was a No. 44 bus here. When the bus arrived, the driver should have seen the shootout happening. There were gunshots everywhere, and armed police officers were all around. Everyone else had stopped their cars. The driver should have stepped on the gas and driven straight through, and he would have been fine. But for some reason, he stopped the bus right in the middle of Tianminjian's line of fire. By this point, Tianminjian had completely lost his mind. He didn't care about anything anymore. He opened fire on the bus, spraying bullets wildly. How many people did he kill on the spot? 17 people. Can you imagine that? 17 innocent civilians dead, not to mention many other people on the street, like cyclists passing by, who were also shot and killed. Right after that, a black sedan drove by. Who was in the car? The Iranian ambassador to China, Yusuf Mohammed Abid. He was taking his 4 children to school. Can you believe the irony of this? Let me ask you this: back then, Chinese people were only allowed to have 1 child, but here was a foreign ambassador with 4 children, living in China. How do you think that made ordinary Chinese people feel? It's just ridiculous. As the car drove past Tianminjian, he opened fire with a full magazine. He killed the ambassador instantly, along with 1 of his children, and seriously injured 2 others. Out of 4 children, only 1 survived unharmed. This entire tragic scene was captured on camera by the journalists from the Canadian embassy. It all happened on September 20th. So what were our own media doing during all this? They quickly cut off all satellite communications to prevent the news from leaking out. But the Canadians were smart. They had filmed everything, and on September 21st, major Canadian TV stations broadcast the footage to the entire world, letting everyone see what had really happened. This is why we have these videos today. Without the Canadian embassy's recordings, we would have no way of knowing the truth. Can you imagine? Such a major incident happened in Beijing, but our own media remained completely silent. This is why I have to say all the journalists and media workers in China at that time had no conscience and no courage. Faced with a gunman on the loose, they didn't even dare to condemn his actions. Faced with dozens of innocent victims, they didn't even dare to express their condolences. Were there any exceptions? Did any of them have a shred of conscience or courage? No. I've always said this, and this incident proves it beyond a doubt. When a major incident like this happens, what's the first thing the authorities do? They cover it up. They try to suppress the news and sweep it under the rug. But did they succeed? Even if they had managed to cover it up, it would have been a disgrace. But they didn't even do that. Well, within a day, the whole world knew about it. They were only trying to fool the Chinese people, only trying to hide the truth from us, like we're fools. Is that right? Some people say that to understand China, you have to go abroad and learn about it through Western media. I used to disagree with this, but now I realize it's true. Only by looking at China from the outside can we really see what our country is really like. Here in China, we have no idea what's really going on. We're kept in the dark. On September 20th, all Chinese media outlets remained completely silent. They were forbidden to report on the incident. This is the reality of China. However, there was one exception. The Beijing Evening News published a 100-word report about the incident, simply stating that Tianminjian had been killed in the shootout. I actually saw this report. I have no idea how it got published, but shortly after it came out, the authorities realized their mistake and immediately banned it. As a result, very few copies of that day's Beijing Evening News remained in circulation. Since all other media were silent and people were desperate for information, everyone wanted to get their hands on a copy of the newspaper. People flocked to newsstands to buy it, but it was already hard to find. Eventually, the price of the newspaper skyrocketed from its original price of 50 cents to 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 40 times, 50 times its original cost. At its peak, a single copy was being sold for 25 yuan. Can you believe that? This is not a lie, I'm not making this up. This is what really happened. I even tried to buy a copy of that day's newspaper myself. I didn't pay 25 yuan for it, but I did spend 18 yuan. But it was a waste of money, I was scammed. The newspaper I bought had the wrong date on it. So even in a time like this, some Chinese people would take advantage of others and scam them. I never got to read that 100-word report. I was cheated out of 18 yuan for nothing. Back to the shootout. By this point, Tian Mingyan was running low on ammunition. He only had around 200 rounds to begin with, and he had wasted a lot of them shooting at buildings. So as we can see, the official claim that he was heading to Tiananmen Square is completely unfounded. After getting out of the car, did he show any signs of going to Tiananmen? No, he never even ran westward in the direction of Tiananmen Square. So we can't say for sure where he was going. He could have been heading to Tiananmen, or he could have been going to Beijing railway station, but he never actually went in either direction. We'll never know his real intentions, because the jeep driver's crash had disrupted his original plan. We don't know where the driver was supposed to take him. We'll never find out. By this time, both sides were in a standoff. Tian Mingyan couldn't stay in one place forever, so he started running into a nearby alley. He was on the side of Jiangguomen Road, and the alley led to Yabeilu. For those who know Beijing well, Yabeilu is quite a distance from Jiangguomen. It's almost a kilometer away on foot. As a trained soldier, Tian Mingyan made a huge mistake in this life-or-death situation. In a combat scenario, you should always find a good defensive position, one where your back is against a building, so you don't get attacked from behind. You should take cover, occupy a favorable terrain, and conserve your ammunition by firing single shots instead of spraying bullets wildly. But clearly, Tian Mingyan was not a well-trained combat soldier. This incident exposed his lack of real combat experience. As he ran towards Yabeilu, he made the fatal mistake of turning his back on the armed police who were chasing him. This should have been a death sentence, but surprisingly, the armed police didn't hit him. They were just shouting at him to surrender, but they couldn't land a single shot. He kept running towards Yabeilu until he finally reached it. But even then, he made another mistake. Instead of finding a good defensive position in Yabeilu, he ran into an open area. He ran straight into the Yabeilu market, which is a very spacious place if you know Beijing. It's so strange, why would he run into such an open area? Eventually, he found a place to hide and continued exchanging fire with the police. By this time, he probably only had one magazine left. His ammunition was almost gone. The standoff continued, and it was already past 11 a.m. The shootout had been going on 4 hours. By this point, a large number of armed police reinforcements had arrived. They were pouring into the area, completely surrounding Yabeilu and Jiangguomen. All traffic on Chang'an Avenue from the west, near the Forbidden City, was stopped. No cars were allowed to pass, and the entire area was sealed off. They had him completely surrounded, and they kept shooting at his position. Later, Chinese media reported that Tian Mingyan was killed in the shootout, but this is not true. In reality, he had kept one bullet for himself. When he realized there was no way out, he used that last bullet to commit suicide. When he shot himself, his eyes were wide open, and he was still clutching his gun tightly. After a long time with no more gunfire, a large crowd of onlookers had gathered around, but no one dared to approach his hiding spot. They couldn't see him from a distance, and they were too afraid to get closer. Eventually, some armed police officers mustered up the courage to go check on him. When they approached, they found that he had already been dead for a while. He had killed himself. But then, something shocking happened. Those armed police officers raised their guns and emptied their magazines into Tian Mingyan's dead body, riddling it with bullets until it was nothing but a bloody mess. Why did they do this? He was already dead, there was no need to shoot him anymore. But they did it anyway. This is the story of the Jiangguomen shootout that happened on September 20th, 1994. For those of you who didn't know about it, now you do. In this incident, Tian Mingyan killed and injured a total of 75 people. The exact number of people he killed is unclear. Estimates say around 40 people, but I don't have the exact figures. I'm not going to comment on this case personally, I don't have the right to. After all, there were so many innocent victims. I'll leave the judgment to others. But I once asked a very good friend of mine about this. He's an extremely honest man, so quiet that he rarely says a word, and he has a daughter. I said to him, "Brother, if someone killed your precious daughter, what would you do? How would you take revenge?" He looked at me and said without hesitation, "I would run into the streets and kill as many people as I could, and then I would kill myself." Alright, that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it.